There was a time when Ubisoft seemed unstoppable. During the late 2000s and 2010s, the company created some of the biggest franchises in gaming. Assassin's Creed transformed open-world design by letting players seamlessly explore dense cities both horizontally and vertically. Farcry gave players unprecedented freedom, encouraging experimentation instead of forcing a linear path. Meanwhile, Rainbow Six Siege broke away from the traditional shooters by emphasizing teamwork, tactics, and slower, more deliberate gameplay. Ubisoft wasn't just successful, it was helping define entire genres. But fast forward to today, and the company finds itself in a very different position. Delayed releases, disappointing launches, failing stock prices, and growing criticism from players have left many wondering what happened to Ubisoft. Ubisoft's decline wasn't caused by a single bad game or one failed decision. Instead, it was the result of years of relying on the same formula, chasing industry trends, and struggling to adapt as player expectations changed. What once made Ubisoft successful eventually became the very thing holding the company back. And nowhere was this more apparent than in Ubisoft's approach to game design. Throughout the 2010s, the company found a formula that worked. Massive open worlds, enemy outposts, map towers, skill trees, collectibles, and dozens of side activities kept players engaged for hundreds of hours. The problem wasn't that these mechanics were bad. In fact, they helped make Ubisoft one of the biggest publishers in gaming. The problem was that Ubisoft kept using them over and over again. Assassin's Creed was perhaps the biggest example of this. After the success of the early games, Ubisoft began releasing new entries at an aggressive pace. While each game introduced a new historical settings, many players felt the core experience remained largely the same. Climb towers to reveal the map, complete repetitive side activities, collect dozens of items, and slowly clear icons from an increasingly crowded map. What once felt innovative gradually became predictable. Far Cry faced a similar issue too. While each entry introduced a new setting and villain, the core experience remained largely unchanged. Players would capture outposts, gather allies to help them fight, climb towers to reveal the map, and repeat the cycle until the credits rolled. Wait, hold up a second. If that description sounds familiar, that's because it is. Strip away the historical settings of Assassin's Creed or the tropical islands and mountains of Far Cry, and the gameplay loops begin to sound eerily similar. The underlying design philosophy often remained the same. Watch Dogs suffered from many of the same problems. While its hacking mechanisms initially helped the series stand out, the structure underneath was often criticized for feeling like another Ubisoft open world. In an attempt to shake up the formula, Watch Dogs Legion introduced the ambitious ability to recruit and play as almost any NPC in the game world. However, many fans felt the system came at the cost of memorable protagonists and a compelling narrative. At the same time, Legion reduced some of the hacking options that had defined previous entries, leaving many players feeling that the series had lost part of its identity. Despite Ubisoft's attempts to innovate, different settings and new mechanics weren't just enough to prevent comparisons to the company's other franchises. Over time, Ubisoft's biggest games began to blur together. Instead of feeling like distinct experiences, many players saw them as different versions of the same formula. The design philosophy that had once made Ubisoft successful was now becoming one of the company's greatest challenges. As players grew increasingly tired of Ubisoft's formula, the company faced a difficult challenge. The gaming industry was changing rapidly, and Ubisoft needed a way to stay relevant. However, instead of focusing on innovation within its existing franchises, the company often found itself chasing whatever trend happened to be popular at the time. The most obvious example was the industry shift towards live service games. Following the success of titles like Fortnite and other long-term online experiences, publishers began chasing the promise of recurring revenue through battle passes, microtransactions, and seasonal content. Ubisoft was no exception. Over the years, the company announced or developed a growing number of live service projects, including Hyperscape, X-Defiant, The Division Heartland, Ghost Recon Frontline, and several other multiplayer-focused titles. Many of these projects struggled to gain traction, were cancelled before release, or failed to maintain a long-term player base. Rather than leading industry trends, as it had during its peak years, Ubisoft increasingly appeared to be desperately following them. Resources that could have been spent creating new ideas or improving existing franchises were instead directed towards chasing the next big thing. The result was a string of projects that often felt reactive rather than innovative. Ubisoft's trend chasing wasn't limited to live service games. In 2021, the company announced Ubisoft Quartz, a platform that would allow players to purchase NFT-based cosmetic items called digits for games such as Ghost Recon Breakpoint. At the time, NFTs were one of the biggest trends in the tech industry, with companies rushing to find ways to incorporate blockchain technology into their products. The problem was that gamers largely didn't want them. The reveal trailer for Ubisoft Quartz was met with overwhelming backlash, receiving far more dislikes than likes and generating widespread criticism across social media. One comment that captured the community sentiment read, "Literally no one asked for this. The future of AAA gaming is looking grim." What made the situation particularly damaging was how disconnected the initiative seemed from Ubisoft's existing problems. Players had been asking for more innovation, better game launches, and improvements to the community's major franchises. Instead, Ubisoft appeared focused on jumping onto the latest tech trend rather than rebuilding trust with its audience. Quartz only reinforced the growing perception that the company was prioritizing monetization opportunities over creating better games. Eventually, Ubisoft quietly moved away from the project, but the damage had already been done. Quartz became another example of a company that once led the industry, now appearing out of touch with the people who played its games. Moreover, Ubisoft's problems extended far beyond repetitive game design and failed attempts to chase industry trends. Behind the scenes, the company was dealing with a growing crisis that could damage its reputation and raise questions about its leadership. In 2020, Ubisoft found itself at the center of numerous allegations involving workplace misconduct, harassment, and abuse. Several high-ranking executives and creative leaders were accused of fostering a toxic work environment, leading to investigations and multiple departures from the company. The controversy quickly became one of the biggest scandals in Ubisoft's history. What had started as individual accusations soon evolved into a broader criticism of the company's culture and management practices. Current and former employees described an environment where inappropriate behavior was often ignored and where those responsible frequently avoided meaningful consequences. In one Reddit post from a former Ubisoft employee, they described chaotic layoffs, severe burnout, and what they viewed as poor management practices. According to the post, employees were informed of layoffs through unexpected meetings, teams were left understaffed, and remaining workers were expected to absorb the responsibilities of those who had been let go. For many players, these revelations changed how they viewed Ubisoft. The company was no longer being criticized solely for its games, but also for its culture that existed behind them. At a time when Ubisoft was already struggling to maintain player confidence, the allegations further damaged trust in the company and its leadership. Perhaps most importantly, the controversy highlighted deeper issues within Ubisoft's management. Critics argued that the same leadership problems being exposed internally were also contributing to the company's creative struggles. While Ubisoft promised reforms and organizational changes, many employees and observers questioned whether those efforts went far enough. These problems would eventually begin to show up where it matters most: Ubisoft's finances. As player sentiment declined and major projects struggled to meet expectations, Ubisoft found itself under increasing financial pressure. The company's stock price, which had once reflected confidence in Ubisoft's future, began a long downward trend as investors grew concerned about delayed releases, canceled projects, and inconsistent game performance. The result was a company facing mounting pressure from both players and investors. Revenue growth slowed, confidence weakened, and questions began to emerge about Ubisoft's long-term direction. For a publisher that would once seemed untouchable, the possibility of genuine financial trouble was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Perhaps the most telling sign of Ubisoft's decline was its stock price. From its peak in the late 2010s, the company's market value fell drastically as investors lost confidence in Ubisoft's ability to consistently deliver successful releases. By this point, Ubisoft wasn't just dealing with one problem, it was dealing with dozens. Creative stagnation, failed trend chasing, internal turmoil, delayed projects, and declining financial performance had all combined to create a crisis years in the making. So what happened to Ubisoft? The company's decline wasn't caused by a single bad game or one failed decision. Instead, it was the result of years of repetitive game design, trend chasing, internal turmoil, and costly development struggles. The same company that once helped define gaming trends gradually found itself struggling to keep up with an industry that had moved on. Despite its current challenges, Ubisoft still owns some of gaming's biggest franchises, and its future is far from decided. The question now isn't whether Ubisoft was once great, it's whether the company can find a way back to that level again. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.